President Trump says the ceasefire with Iran is on life support. And
the ceasefire between the US and Iran is facing its most serious test yet.
Is ready to consider any proposal that guarantees a complete end to the war.
Nerath Tidal Relay Terminal, 6 kilometers from the Black Narrows choke point. 1:58 in the morning. 84 Tide Rangers of the 9th Tide Ranger Regiment faced a garrison of 190. Azdaran maritime guard troops to eliminate Commodore Serik Vhal and cripple the Nerath terminal before naval and air response closed the window in 31 minutes. Commodore Serik Vhal was a maritime guard officer who directed interdiction traffic through the Black Narrows, and in 11 years he had coordinated 143 seizure operations from the inner islands to the open Gulf. The Nerath Tidal Relay Terminal controlled fuel transfer, encrypted harbor routing, and offshore replenishment schedules that kept patrol cutters, missile skiffs, and coastal batteries moving through the Narrows without pause. Both targets were reachable tonight because Vhal had scheduled a midnight inspection of the relay floor after a storm outage, placing the commander and the terminal's operating core inside the same fenced compound for one narrow interval. The mission was simple in wording and narrow in time. 84 Rangers, 2 objectives, 1 window, no second pass. The Nerath terminal stood low and wide against the shoreline, built in concrete tiers above black water and linked by steel catwalks, service tunnels, and elevated pipelines that ran from the storage berms to the pier manifolds. 4 systems made the site matter: the reserve tank farm on the east side, the relay control room in the central block, the underpier transfer junction feeding the offshore lines, and the turbine annex that powered the encrypted signal arrays and pump systems. Commodore Vhal was expected inside the second-floor operations gallery above the control room, where armored glass faced the channel and gave him a direct view of the patrol lanes. The maritime guard had ringed the compound with Garand 12 heavy guns on raised pads, Roken twin cannon mounts near the pier gates, Nesk machine gun nests on the roofline, Kesh service rifles in the hands of sentries, Vask rocket tubes in the vehicle sheds, Derrill wire-guided missiles covering the causeway, and 2 Nadir fast boats with deck-mounted 23mm cannon idling in dark water below the pier. Azdaran Command believed Vhal was safe here because the site sat inside overlapping coastal radar, naval patrol corridors, and hardened shoreline defenses, and because every approach was broken by surf walls, fuel barriers, and exposed flats that made outside movement easy to see. If both objectives were completed, Azdara would lose the officer directing the Black Narrow screen and the terminal that sustained that screen in the same hour. The operation depended on 2 tasks moving in parallel and finishing together. Charlie Element had to reach Commodore Vhal before the alarm pushed him from the gallery into the buried shelter route beneath the control block. Bravo Element had to seed Kestrel charges across the terminal's 4 critical points before internal shutters sealed, flood doors locked, and emergency crews isolated the systems from one another. If Charlie was delayed, Vhal vanished into concrete and steel. If Bravo was delayed, the terminal compartmentalized and the demolition pattern failed. Bravo carried Kestrel charges, hushline detonators, and thermal cutters for the structural points. Charlie carried suppressed Vector 6 carbines, breech 12 compact shotguns, and short-barrel sawn sidearms for the close interior fight. Command planners divided the Tide Rangers into 4 elements. Alpha Element would breach the perimeter and create entry using suppressed HN-18 carbines, VX-4 cutters, and flash-cut charges. Bravo Element would reach facility demolition points with Turn 9 carbines and Kestrel charges to destroy storage, control room, pipeline junction, and power systems. Charlie Element would reach the commander's location using suppressed Vector 6 carbines, breech 12 shotguns, and sawn sidearms to neutralize or capture him. Delta Element would hold perimeter and engage naval assets using Harrow 4 support guns, Glaive 3 rifles, and Aster 7 launchers. Both Bravo and Charlie had to reach their objectives at the same moment. The plan had no margin for delay. At 2:01, Alpha cut the outer fence and crossed the service lane under suppressed HN-18 fire. 2 pier sentries with Kesh rifles turned toward the sound, but the shots came first and the gate controls were taken before the alarm panel lit. A VX-4 cutter opened the maintenance barrier, and the entry lane into the terminal yard was clear. Delta spread behind the sea wall with Harrow 4 guns while Bravo and Charlie passed through the opening on the same clock. 3 minutes into the operation, Bravo turned east toward the tank berms and Charlie went west toward the central block. Bravo moved through pipe shadows with Turn 9 carbines up while 2 Rangers fixed the first Kestrel charges beneath the reserve transfer couplings. Charlie crossed the truck court toward the operations building and saw more guards than the brief had forecast, including a stairwell team with Kesh rifles and 1 rooftop Nest gun looking over the gallery windows. The split was clean, but the compound was awake sooner than planned. At 2:05, Charlie forced the west service door with a breech 12 and entered the control block under suppressed Vector 6 fire. The first security team reacted from the stair landing with Kesh rifles and a compact Vask launcher, but Charlie dropped the launcher man before he could bring the tube level. Bravo armed the first demolition point as alarm relays flashed amber in the control room ceiling above them. The terminal still had not fully locked down, but the building had started to feel the hit. 6 minutes into the operation, the base alarm triggered and the entire terminal lit white under flood arrays. Roken twin cannon mounts began slewing toward the inner yard while maritime guard troops ran from the barracks and vehicle sheds with Kesh rifles and Vask tubes. One Ranger from Charlie went down in the first exchange. Charlie answered with Vector 6 fire up the stairwell, Bravo shifted deeper into the pipes with Turn 9 carbines, and Delta opened with Glaive 3 rifles to keep the outer towers down. At 2:08, Bravo reached the relay control room wall and started placing the second Kestrel package on the Conduit Raceway outside the central block. Inside that same block, Charlie moved floor by floor toward the operations gallery while Commodore Vhal's security detachment reacted faster than the rest of the garrison and sealed the inner office corridor with Nest guns and Kesh rifles. Alpha entered behind Charlie with HN-18 carbines and pushed the lower halls to keep the path from closing. Bravo finished the second placement, but the terminal had now recognized that the attack was moving toward both targets at once. 9 minutes into the operation, an outside quick reaction force arrived from the causeway earlier and larger than intelligence had predicted. 4 armored utility carriers and 2 cargo trucks rolled toward the outer gate while dismounts jumped clear with Kesh rifles and belt-fed Nest guns. Delta met them with Harrow 4 bursts from the sea wall, and Alpha cut across the service court to keep the new arrivals from reaching the central block. The result was space, not relief. The outside pressure fixed Delta in place and tightened the clock for everyone inside. At 2:11, 2 Nadir fast boats detached from the channel picket and drove in from the Black Narrows toward the terminal pier. Their deck-mounted 23mm cannon began searching the shoreline positions as spray broke over the concrete pilings below. Delta launched an Azdara-7 and hit the lead boat just forward of the bridge, blowing fire across the bow and driving it into the pier fenders. The second boat answered with 23mm fire and stitched the sea wall. 2 Rangers were hit. 1 was critical. 12 minutes into the operation, Charlie reached the gallery level above the control room and found Val's personal security detail larger than the file had described. The corridor fight closed fast under Vector 6 fire and breached 12 blasts, while 1 bodyguard tried to pull the commander toward the shelter stair behind the map room. Charlie cut that movement off with saw and sidearm fire through the doorway glass. Commodore Serik Vhal was neutralized, and Charlie began moving out with their wounded before the inner doors could seal around them. At 2:14, Bravo crossed the underpier catwalks and set the third Kestrel package on the transfer junction that fed the offshore lines. Maritime guard troops fired from below with Kesh rifles and from the crane house with a Nest gun, forcing Bravo to work in short intervals under ricochet and steel fragments. Alpha used HN-18 carbines to suppress the crane house while Delta swung 1 Glaive 3 marksman over the catwalk approach and dropped the Nest gunner. The third point was armed, but the turbine annex on the north edge remained untouched. 15 minutes into the operation, Rangers started consolidating toward the extraction corridor with Charlie carrying their wounded out of the central block. Movement slowed immediately because the route had narrowed under floodlight, smoke, and falling cable from the relay tower hit. Bravo tried to break toward the turbine annex with Turn 9 carbines and 1 remaining Kestrel case, but a new stream of maritime guard troops cut across from the annex yard behind a Roken cannon shield. Bravo had to fall back behind the pipe berms, and the 4th charge was not placed. At 2:17, Delta shifted fire from the waterline to the causeway as a 6-truck vehicle column reached the outer perimeter and began unloading more troops. Alpha and Delta met it together with Harrow, 4 guns and Morn's 6 recoilless launchers from the vehicle trench beside the cut fence. 3 trucks burned where they stopped, and the remaining dismounts scattered into the berms under Kesh rifle fire of their own. The Rangers did not hold the ground, they only opened the corridor long enough to move through it. 18 minutes into the operation, the surviving troops from the truck column tried to push through the service yard and reach the central block before Charlie could clear. Charlie answered from the loading bays with Vector 6 carbines while Alpha crossed the rear lane and hit the nearest berm with HN-18 fire. The Azdaran troops kept coming, disciplined and direct, but the Rangers were already inside the extraction corridor and moving toward the shoreline cut. The result was separation by seconds, not comfort. At 2:20, Bravo triggered the hushline timers on the 3 armed Kestrel packages as the last demolition team left the underpier service ladder. Maritime guard troops saw the withdrawal and intensified fire from the catwalks, the control roof, and the fuel berm, trying to pin the Rangers inside the kill zone before the timers ran down. Delta used the final Azdara-7 to silence the disabled lead boat when its surviving crew tried to reman the 23mm deck cannon. The countdown was running and every Ranger still inside the radius knew 1 point was missing. 21 minutes into the operation, the first detonation tore through the reserve tank couplings and opened a wall of fuel fire along the east berm. A second blast crushed the relay control room into its lower floor and sent concrete across the yard, while the third charge broke the underpier junction and split the offshore transfer line in a sheet of black water and flame. The Maritime Guard fired back with everything still standing, including Kesh rifles, Nest guns, and one surviving Roken mount at the north yard. The terminal had been struck hard, but the turbine annex still held power to part of the site. At 2:22, the power systems facility was still standing in the north annex, lit by emergency blue lamps and isolated behind a steel shutter that Bravo had never reached. Engineers and guards began routing backup current through the surviving conduits while fire crews tried to cut the relay block off from the tank blaze. Alpha and Delta fought a final rearward action with HN-18 carbines and Harrow 4 bursts from the shoreline access road to stop pursuit. The demolition was real, but it was incomplete. 24 minutes into the operation, Charlie crossed the shoreline cut with the commander confirmed down and the wounded carried between two teams. The second Nadir fast boat, still burning at the stern, tried one more burst of 23mm fire from the pier shadow, but a Glaive 3 round shattered the gunner's position and the boat drifted hard into the pilings. Maritime guard troops continued firing from the annex roofs and seawall bunkers with Kesh rifles and Nest guns. The Rangers kept moving, slow because of weight, steady because stopping meant losing the corridor. At 2:25, the last organized Azdaran push came from the north yard where the surviving truck dismounts and annex guards tried to close the road behind the Rangers. Delta turned and broke the attempt with Harrow 4 fire while Alpha sent 2 Morn 6 rounds into the lead barricade vehicle and forced the rest to stop short. Bravo cleared the final bend with the unused Kestrel case still on one man's back. The column behind them stalled in smoke, wreckage, and fuel flame. 27 minutes into the operation, the last Ranger element cleared the kill zone and extraction was complete. Behind them, the Nerath terminal burned from the tank berm to the broken pier junction, but the turbine annex still stood inside smoke and emergency light. Maritime guard troops held the ruin that remained and kept firing into empty dark water with Kesh rifles and one surviving Roken mount. The operation ended with 1 commander eliminated, 3 demolition points destroyed, and 1 objective left standing. The 9th Tide Ranger Regiment lost 4 soldiers killed and 11 wounded. Azdaran Maritime Guard forces suffered 147 killed, 73 wounded, and 8 captured. Commodore Serik Vhal was eliminated. 3 of 4 facility demolition objectives were completed. The power generation systems were not destroyed. Facility damage was valued at $780 million. The commander's network lost its operational head. Serik Vhal had controlled interdiction patrols, boarding schedules, and channel denial traffic across the Black Narrows, while the Nerath terminal had fueled, routed, and powered the patrol structure that kept Azdara present in that water every hour of the day. The Rangers eliminated the commander and destroyed the storage farm, relay control room, and transfer junction, but they did not reach the turbine annex before the compound sealed and the response massed around it. It cost the regiment 4 killed and 11 wounded to strike 2 targets in one night and leave the channel changed before dawn. The 9th Tide Ranger Regiment crossed the Black Narrows, removed 1 command node, and proved that even fortified water can be entered and altered.